Good evening. My name is Chelsea Watson, and I serve as the Parkway Deputy Superintendent. Thanks so much for joining us this evening. I know we have families from Piermont, Hannah Woods, West Middle, Southwest Middle, and others from around the district. We are so glad that you have chosen to spend some time with us this evening. As many of you read in Dr. Marty's letter last week, tonight we will be discussing enrollment, space, and capacity issues that are impacting some of our schools. If you watched the Board of Education meeting last week, please know this presentation will look and sound a little familiar. What do we want to discuss tonight? Well, we want to share an update that we gave to our Board of Education last week regarding the impact to students on overcrowding at West Middle School. Other options to consider based on the overcrowding at West Middle School, and some of the feedback that we're hearing from you. So where are we going from here? We will share a timeline moving forward. Please know that no decisions have been made, and the earliest decision will be the fall of 2021. Also, a high school decision has not been made. We know there's been lots of conversation around where kids might potentially go to high school, and we will also address that this evening and share a little information. At this time, I'd like to introduce the others that you will hear from this evening. We have Mrs. Patty Bedborough, our Chief Financial Officer. Also, Mr. Paul Tandy, Parkway's Chief Communications and Emergency Management Officer, and Dr. Annie Miller, the principal of West Middle School. So again, we presented to our Board of Education last week, and after that, we did ask parents to provide some feedback. Lastly, just remind you, no decisions have been made. We're not making decisions this evening. And we also know that sometimes these conversations are difficult. But what I want to share now is our Parkway mission. First and foremost, we must begin everything with understanding our why here in Parkway. Parkway's mission lies at the root of everything that we do. Our mission directs our work each and every day, no matter how great or trivial the task. Prior to 2011, the Parkway mission was focused on adults. And since 2011, our focus has been on students, and that's exactly where our focus should be today and every day. So I hope all of you will join us in embracing the Parkway mission as we discuss school enrollment and attendance areas. Most organizations, next slide please. Most organizations have a strategic plan. Parkway is no different. Parkway's current strategic plan is noted as Project Parkway 2.0. Our strategic plan guides our work and encompasses 3 goals. Here on the slide, you will find Parkway's 3 goals. As you can see, Goal 1 focuses on students. Goal 2 focuses on our staff. And Goal 3, resources. Responsibly and efficiently allocate resources, including finances, facilities, personnel, and time. So the conversation this evening shines a spotlight on Goals 1 and Goals 3. Now, last week during the Board of Education meeting, we also gave an update on our ongoing facilities work. And so I just want to help you understand what Facilities 2030 means when you hear that. So I'm going to take you back for a minute. Facilities 2020 was, and Facilities 2030 is, the umbrella in which topics associated with facilities, enrollments, and student learning environments are discussed, and recommendations determined, and ultimately approved by the Board of Education if that is the route in which they want to take. Facilities 2020 addressed the enrollment challenges we were experiencing in the majority of our North Area schools. And in 2011, some significant adjustments were made regarding boundary lines and where kids go to school. Facilities 2020 was completed around 2018. And in April of 2019, we began planning for the next 10 years. Thus, we have Facilities 2030, where we are now. Most recently, as a part of our Facilities 2030 work, we addressed enrollment growth concerns at Craig and Shenandoah Valley. At the beginning of this school year, some of our elementary students shifted elementary schools based on overcrowding and projections at some of our elementary schools. So you will find that the concerns we are revisiting or visiting with you this evening are not nearly as drastic as what was necessary to occur when addressing the previous two enrollments. So next slide, why are we here? Again, the aspect of Facilities 2030 that we will be addressing tonight involves school enrollment, the impact school enrollment has on our schools, and how we maintain a quality student learning environment for all. We want you to understand the problem we've been discussing and monitoring. You will see that we have challenges in one of our middle schools, and to maintain focus on our mission, on our students, all students, and Project Parkway 2.0, we must do some things differently. So at this point, I am going to turn it over to Patty Bedborough, our Chief Financial Officer, and she's going to share some numbers with you, among some other things. Patty?
Thank you, Dr. Watson. Welcome, everyone. As you know, or may not know, we have a director of data management, and his name is Dr. Nathan Tyson. Each year, he does an in-depth enrollment analysis. So he not only looks at the current year, but he goes out 5 years as well. Of course, on a monthly basis, we do get updates, but not to the 5-year enrollment analysis. This slide here depicts our enrollment by what we call level. So the blue line represents our total number of students enrolled in elementary. The green line is our students in the high school, and the red line represents our students in the middle school. What you can see from here is that in the upcoming years, we are expecting an essentially flat enrollment trend. Certainly, you can see a slight impact or uptake in the elementary level for next year, a slight decline over the years in our high school, but essentially a pretty even number overall with our middle school enrollment. Next slide, please. One item that we'd like to share with you is some of the new residential developments that potentially will be in our area, and I say potentially because one's potential. And what we do know is these will have little impact on our total enrollment. So subdivisions that are guided to be in the Piermont area, Arbors at Highlands, right now it has 60 homes scheduled to begin in November of 2021. The factor that Dr. Tyson utilizes to estimate enrollment for new subdivisions is a 0.25 multiplied by the number of homes. So in this example, the 60 homes times the factor of 0.25 equals 15 estimated new students. He would place 2 in each level, kindergarten and first grade, and then 1 at each level that is second grade through 12. So not making a large impact on the individual school. The subdivision that is mapped out to potentially be at the former JFK site is 74 homes. So taking that same equation, the 74 times the 0.25 factor equals 18.5 students. If we divide that by grade level, it's 1.42 per grade level. So Nathan would take 2 students each at kindergarten through 3, and then 1 student each at 4 through 12. So certainly not making a large impact at any one school. And then one other subdivision to note is in the Oak Brook attendance area, and that's Arbors at Bridle Point Park, and that has an estimated 40 homes. We wanted to include this just to simply have the discussion of what that potential new homes and development would make on our future projections as well. Next slide, please. So our most recent look at our 5-year enrollment for middle schools is depicted above. Looking closely at the projected enrollment for the next 5 years by school, you can see that Northeast Middle enrollment the projection is to be a slight increase. Central Middle School is projected to be a slight decrease, going from the current 889 students to 859 students. However, when we look at West Middle School, we do have a rather flat projection. Currently, they're at 1,052 students. We will have a slight intake projected for next year, but then in a 5-year projection ends at 1,048 students. Southwest Middle has a current enrollment of 602 and is expected to decrease enrollment to 560 students in 5 years. And South Middle, currently at 577 students, is projected to have a slight decrease to 514 students. Things to consider in these numbers, it includes not only our in-person enrollment, but our virtual enrollment as well. So we have discussed the large enrollment and overcrowding of West Middle for a few years now. One of our main concerns is to ensure that we are maximizing our existing space before making a decision to add space at West Middle. Clearly, we have the space available at both South area middle schools, South Middle and Southwest Middle. So it makes sense that we look at options that would perhaps move students to those existing building spaces prior to making a decision to add on to West Middle. And that's us fully utilizing our goal 3 in our strategic plan. In addition, we want to provide a leveling of the enrollments in the schools as well. And tonight we'll also hear from Dr. Miller, and she will explain some of the concerns that we have with having one of the largest middle schools.
All right. I'm Dr. Annie Miller from West Middle. Just wanted to thank you for letting me be here today. To speak to Ms. Bedborough's last few comments, utilizing the space at West Middle. Over the last 4 to 5 years, we have found every nook and cranny that is available to turn into a classroom or provide lockers. We've turned a couple locker bays into classrooms here at West Middle in the attempt to provide solutions to our increased enrollment, moving lockers from downstairs to upstairs so that we can have, a safer building and be able to move kids through here. Another addition was widening a hallway where we were able to do that. So just wanted to tell you a few solutions that we've worked on over the past 4 to 5 years to help with, managing West Middle. So I wanted to talk about a few things. First of all, one of the overall points is a difference in the experience that students have socially and academically at West Middle just due to the sheer size. And I'll talk to a few examples of that. First of all, a middle school over 1,000 can overall have a negative impact on the school culture and community, and I'll give some examples of that. I think the biggest portion of this is not only do we follow the Parkway mission, we have our own mission here at West Middle is to ensure every student has a purpose, place, and voice. And if we go just from that why of ours, that we're finding that is the biggest driver is that our students aren't able to have that caring adult that trusted adult so that teachers and students can make positive interactions with all students and all teachers. When you have that large of a school, it makes it more difficult to get to know every student and every student's needs, whether it be socially or academically. We know every student has a unique set of needs, and our job is to be able to give them feedback that's timely to help them grow and thrive. And I would argue that middle school is such a time that it can be difficult in itself. That is probably the most important thing, is really to get to know every student so that we can assist them in their growth and development. Overall, with those points is traffic and obviously safety concerns. So if you've had the opportunity to be in West Middle during a passing time, you would notice that it is extremely crowded. And I think one of the things that that does to the experience socially is it causes some anxiety for kids. It causes some negative interactions between students that are not intentional, but then can disrupt the rest of the day. The same kind of things happen at lunch when you're trying to feed, up 360 kids at one time, and then getting them outside to be able to run around a bit. Having that many kids, can really cause some things to kind of stir up, and there are things that are not intended, and kids may perceive them incorrectly because of the busyness of moving through the school. This year we've adjusted and created a longer passing time, but that does pull into the academic time if we're enabling, taking 2 or 3 minutes away from the academic learning time of each class. So I just noticed that when kids have interactions in the hallway, they may perceive it to be negative when it's just one person hurrying to get to class versus another. And if you've been around any middle schoolers, their social skills are still a work in progress. So they may not know how to interact and say, excuse me. And we tend to have sixth graders that go down the hall like they're on the football field, literally tuck and roll, trying to get through the hallway. And we've got some areas that are really significantly what I would consider to be a safety concern. The stairway, we have the typical up and down, but that can be an area that can, really make you nervous when you see the amount of kids moving through the building. Due to the large amount, we have support staff. I think some people would think the simple solution is to add more teachers, but we already have teachers in our support staff capabilities of pulling kids out of the classroom and maybe working with them in a well, because there isn't a classroom that's available during that time for them to work with the student. That doesn't provide a interruption-free environment so kids can thrive academically. Another example would be prior to this year, because COVID is a little bit different, but we only have one band room, and we had to have band in the cafeteria in an art room. That takes academic time away from that class, because they actually have to go to the band room, retrieve their instruments, get settled. It's like 2 points of getting kids settled into learning, and then end short so they can put the instruments back. So I know that that was a big concern for parents and families during that time. So we have a lot of shared spaces that we really have to work to make sure that everybody has what they need. And it might not be like a situation that you would have at a school that isn't, we'll say, busting at the seams, for lack of a better term. In our classrooms, because our class sizes are larger, teachers are finding that they can't move around the classroom so that students can have a more collaborative opportunity. We know collaborative learning or cooperative learning provides an extension to their learning, helps them hold on to that information, and that becomes very difficult We know that when we're serving lunch in the cafeteria to over 350 kids, there's not a lot of space. Again, what we've adopted this time during COVID, we have kids eating in the small gym, which enables us not to be able to have gym during that time. But it's also providing more space for us, that it would be something we would probably continue into next year, and enables us to be able to supervise kids better. So if we do see something happening, some sort of misunderstanding, miscommunication, we can intervene a little bit quicker. I think one of the other important factors is when you're working with kids in this capacity and you're able to intervene and differentiate, you're just dealing with a lot larger scale of students. So it begs to ask, are students getting what they need? Do we have kids that are kind of slipping through the cracks, or maybe melting into the woodwork, as we would say, that aren't getting what they need because maybe they're not speaking up? Those are just a few of the things that we've experienced over the last 4 or 5 years. And then to mention, again, hiring more teachers would be a solution that parents might think would be okay, but we don't have anywhere to put them. They can't teach class in the hallway. We do have teachers that teach in the library. We have teachers that teach in extremely small classrooms that we've converted into classrooms so we can have an additional space. And then another issue because of the site is the sheer traffic that comes in to our parking lot. If you have had the pleasure of being here at arrival or dismissal, you would know that especially at dismissal, the buses wrap entirely around the entire school for students to be picked up. I believe we have about 32 buses that roll into West Middle. And, again, going back to that anxiety of kids trying to get where they need to be, if you're here at the end of the day, it's kind of just, kids want to get out and get to the bus, and it's crowded. It is crowded. So in addition to parents dropping kids off, I feel like we have mastered that a little better this year with so many parents driving, but still we have a large amount of traffic in our parking lot each day. And I believe I counted that we have about 7 parking spaces after everyone arrives in the morning for visitors or parents picking up their kids. So that is a concern also. And like I said, we've done everything we can possibly think of to kind of keep everything intact. But when you look at the overall, how do kids feel about school? How do they feel about their interactions? How do they feel about if they're a part of a community? When you have over 1,000 kids, it's really hard to create that culture and that community that we know is so vital for our kids to thrive, especially in middle school. I think middle school is unique because we don't have those sports opportunities like high school does to bring kids together, which leads us to after school activities. We are limited on kids that we can pull into that because of teachers being able to stay after. They may have to cap an activity because there's only so many adults that can supervise. And then another part will be that bus ride home being very full. I won't forget that we had a 6th grade mixer pre-COVID, and we had activity buses ready to go. And I remember that it took the kids so long to get home from that activity that I had a lot of parents that were really upset. But when you have a lot of kids that come to an activity, you have to get them home. And so those are some of the differences, I would say, to being at such a large school as opposed to a smaller school. And I'm not sure if I missed anything, if anybody wanted to add anything. I think that's all I have.
Thank you, Dr. Miller. I appreciate your time tonight, sharing some of the stories and examples of the realities you're seeing with the students and staff there in the building. This is the problem's not going to go away. We've looked at the enrollment projections; they're flat. but they're not going down. And so we've been, this has been something we've been looking at for a few years, looked at various options. As Ms. Bedborough mentioned earlier, one option you always, do consider is, could we just add on to the building? And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. For several reasons, that's not something we're recommending at this time. One of which would be it really doesn't solve the problem. If you create more classrooms and so forth, you still have the problem with many of the problems that Dr. Miller mentioned. We do have fairly tight hallways and limited other spaces like cafeterias and places for students and teachers to do what they need to do. So it really wouldn't solve the problem. And also it would be, you have to be careful with taxpayer money whenever we do that, because that's a significant investment. And it would take multiple years, obviously, to get that done. You'd put it on a bond, and it would take, if that passed, then you'd have to take several years to construct the facility. So you're still looking several years down the road when we think we probably have some other options available to us. Fortunately, when we're looking at boundary line, potential boundary adjustments, the Board of Education has guidelines that kind of guide our work. And I would like to briefly walk through those. We mentioned these at the board meeting the other night, and I'd like to go through those tonight as well, so you can see what those are. These are sort of the benchmark that we hold up any proposal against. And we try to meet as many of these guidelines as we can. Usually you can't meet them all, because sometimes if you meet one, you won't meet the other. But you try to meet as many of these as you can. And we've had these in place for a number of years, and I just would quickly run through them. First of all, we want to support the concept of the neighborhood school insofar as possible, to keep students to attend the school, if possible, the one that's nearest their home. We can't always accomplish that, but that would be our goal. We want to favor, if possible, students who are presently enrolled in Parkway over prospective new students. So to the extent you can, make the changes so that currently enrolled students have little or no impact, but perhaps new students coming through the system would be under the new attendance boundaries or new changes. Back one more, Jason. To avoid moving a child for 1 year at a time. Obviously, you don't want to do that. We want to make whatever change go out as far as we can. In our enrollment projections, we go out 5 years. That's about as far out as we feel we can go comfortably, because things do change a lot in 5 years, but we feel pretty good about our 5-year enrollment projections. And finally, on this slide, safety, and making sure you're considering the safety of students, particularly on their way to and from school. Next slide. To equalize the number of students in each building as much as possible according to their capacity. That's kind of one of the ones we're dealing with here. To try to keep students in the same subdivision going to the same school for obvious reasons, and to coordinate elementary and secondary attendance areas and their feeder patterns. So we try to avoid in Parkway splitting so that elementary feeds into middle schools or a middle school feeds into 2 high schools. Many school districts around us do that, and it can be done successfully. We try to avoid it. We think it's ideal if we didn't have to do that. We still do have a couple of splits. We will talk about that tonight, Highcroft Ridge and Mason Ridge, but that's the only ones that we currently have in Parkway. And then the final guideline is basically move as few students as possible to accomplish your objectives. So we always want to be careful and not move more students and families that we have to. So there's our guidelines. The potential solution that we mentioned to the school board the other night, again, we've looked at this and looked at various options. But the one that we are looking at presently is to begin a multi-year transition that would start in the fall of 2022. So for the 22-23 school year, that would transition the Piermont elementary students from West Middle to South Middle, and then transition Hannah Woods elementary students from South Middle to Southwest Middle. And we will talk about that. The primary reason for the Hannah Woods change would be that if we did transition Piermont students to South Middle is our smallest middle school, and we could potentially get to where that school is overcrowded, and we don't want to do that. But we have Southwest Middle, which is our newest middle school, has excess capacity, can handle a lot more students, and we could easily transition Hannah Woods. And as you see in the maps, many people over the years, I've been here a long time, and people have often asked me, why doesn't Piermont go to South Middle and why doesn't Hannah Woods go to Southwest? I get that a lot. So if we could go to the next slide, I'm going to look at, we're going to walk through some maps together. So this map is of the, the green is the Parkway West attendance area, and the blue is the South attendance area. To orient you a little bit, the highway on the far right side going up and down, that's 270, and the highway on the top part of the map going to the left and right, that's 4064. The one down, basically going down through the middle of the map is 141. And then the road that differentiates the green from the blue is Manchester Road, if that helps orient you. And then in the orange, I'll identify the locations of the middle schools. So first, in the upper left, you'll see the location of Parkway West Middle, and you'll say, well, why is it clear over on the far western side of the boundary? If you know that attendance boundary, most of the people live there either in the western or central part of the attendance boundary. Over to the eastern side, it's fewer people and more larger properties and so forth. And then if you look on the right in the middle of the map, the orange dot shows you where South Middle School is. And yes, South Middle is located basically right in the middle of the west attendance area. Not sure why it was put there, but there it is. And then if you look down in the toward the bottom of the map, you'll see the location of Southwest Middle. So those are the three middle schools that service the west and south attendance areas. The south area is the only area in Parkway that has two middle schools that feed into the high school, and that is due to the historically high enrollment in the south area. Next, you'll look at the dot basically just below South Middle, and that's the location of Piermont. And you will see in the white outline, that is the outline of the current Piermont attendance boundary line. And so you can see how close it is in proximity to South Middle. If you look out the windows of South Middle, the school or the houses that surround you are houses of families that currently attend West Middle. So if we were to make the change, and we'll switch to the next slide, please. So this is what then the south attendance boundary would look like. And as you can see, Piermont would be attending South Middle. And then the blue is the footprint then for the south attendance area. Okay, so if we do that, as I mentioned earlier, South Middle is our smallest middle. So we believe we also need to make sure we're not going to overcrowd South Middle because we have excess capacity in Southwest. So next slide, please. We'll look at the other potential shift. So this is, again, the south attendance area, but now we've broken it into red and blue so you can see how the two middle school boundaries break up within the south attendance area. So in the red is South Middle, and then the blue is Southwest Middle. And then you'll notice, and you can see the location of Hannah Woods and its close proximity to Southwest Middle, just off of Hannah Road, basically right across the street from almost from the gym, one of the gyms in the pool, and the road that leads back around by Southwest Middle. And you will also notice there's this little island down there south of Vance Road. Yes, that is a piece of the Hannah Woods attendance area. Again, not sure why that was created that way, but it is unusual, but that is the Hannah Woods attendance boundaries in the white outline. But yet currently those students attend South Middle, which is located off the map to the north. So if the change were made, we'll skip to the next slide, please. So if we were to shift Hannah Woods to Southwest Middle, then this would be how the attendance boundaries would look, and the blue would be the new Southwest Middle. We clean up that attendance boundary a lot, and frankly, both of these would meet more of the board attendance guidelines that we want to accomplish than what we're currently doing. Often over time, decisions are made, and they just, again, why in the world that island was down there for Hannah Woods, I don't know, but and then occasionally we come back and try to clean some of these things up. We understand this is a challenge. It's very, it can be disruptive for families, and we don't like to do this, believe me. We don't like to recommend things like this, but there are times when we feel like in the interest of the students and the student experience that we need to, and that's what we're hearing from Dr. Miller at West Middle. So if we were to shift Hannah Woods then to Southwest Middle, this is what the new boundary lines for south would look like. And if we could go to the next slide. So then if you kind of zoom out a little bit, again, this would be the new, with the green being west and the blue being south, attendance boundaries, and you can see again the locations of all the schools involved. The one thing we haven't talked about is the feeder pattern for high school, and we'll talk about that tonight a little bit more, as Dr. Watson mentioned, because the challenge we have right now is a middle school challenge, and it's not a high school enrollment challenge. Our high schools still currently have enrollment capacity. So we're really trying to solve the middle school issue, and we need to decide then at some point, what would that impact be for the high school feeders? I think at this point now, I will turn it back over then to Ms. Bedborough, who will talk you through what the changes would look like in terms of enrollment if we did this.
Thank you, Paul. With the potential shifts in our proposal, we asked Dr. Tyson to provide a potential enrollment projection. Now, keep in mind, this does not include anything with special assignments. Also, you'll notice that the totals will vary once the students move. These are minor discrepancies in the projections from table to table. When Dr. Tyson runs the estimates, they're impacted by the survival coefficients with each school. So that can make the slight changes within each school, and then hence with the totals as well. What you will see is that with this proposal, the enrollment of South Middle remains rather stable, and the enrollment of West Middle gradually moves to Southwest Middle. By the fall of 2024, 3 classes would have made the proposed move from the attendance areas. There has been an initial analysis of staffing, and it appears that this move will not have a major impact on our total staffing. Now, when I mentioned that the enrollment moves from West Middle to Southwest Middle, it does not mean that the students moved to that school. It was with the 2 different shifts, that's where the total enrollment changed. Also look at our totals when we look at the years 2024 and 2025. We can tell with this change, we have leveled out some of the enrollment totals, so they're more consistent and in agreement with each other. Next slide. With this proposal, this would be the listing then of the proposed feeder pattern adjustments. So in West Middle, we would keep Claymont, Henry, Highcroft Ridge, which you may recall that Highcroft Ridge, approximately 20% of the students attend West and 80% of the students attend Central Middle. And then Mason Ridge, where essentially the opposite is true. 80% of Mason Ridge students attend West and 20% attend Central Middle. In South Middle, the feeder pattern schools will include Barrett's, Carmen Trails, and Piermont. In Southwest Middle, we'll have elementary schools of Oak Brook, Sorrento Springs, Wren Hollow, and then Hannah Woods as well. Next slide.
Okay, so you've heard a lot of details and you're getting ready to hear more. You've seen maps, you've seen numbers. And so let's just pause for a minute and take a deep breath if by chance you're feeling concerned in any way, shape, or form. And I want to take us back to remembering our focus. Our focus is on students, our mission, Project Parkway 2.0, and most certainly, now you've heard the board guidelines. We recognize this conversation is difficult for some individuals, and it can have an impact, as Mr. Tandy mentioned, on families and what they anticipate to occur. but it's certainly a conversation we must have, because if we did not have it, we wouldn't be staying true to our mission, our strategic plan, and our board policy. So we're going to continue with some details here. Then it will take us to hearing some of the input that we have received thus far since our board meeting. Okay, so on the slide, you see the 4 schools that we have been discussing. The next slide is a little busy, but we're going to break it down. It's going to show the gradual progression from both elementary schools to both middle schools. Next slide, please. Okay, this next slide depicts that gradual shift of elementary students at Piermont and Hannah to South Middle and Southwest Middle, respectively. First of all, before we dig into this slide, I want to clearly state that our current 5th graders are not included in this proposed solution. All 5th graders that are currently in 5th grade will go to the middle school per the current structure in place and continue through 8th grade, okay? This chart represents beginning the shift with our current 4th graders, They will enter middle school in 2022. And if you're a 4th grader at Piermont, you would go to South Middle under this proposal. The current 4th graders at Hannah Woods would go to Southwest Middle in 2022. And this would be the beginning of the gradual shifts. So if you would click again, I think, Jason, okay. So as you see, our current 3rd graders, I'm sorry, I was ahead of myself, would go to their assigned school, South Middle or Southwest, in 2023 for 6th grade. In the fall of 2024, current 2nd graders will be in 6th grade. And as you can see, when our 1st graders and kindergarten students will get to middle school, you can see the years there on the chart. Based on our student enrollment, we need to make this change, and we're proposing this gradual shift. Middle school is a natural transition, and we can take this gradual approach with this specific situation where we haven't had the opportunity to make such a gradual shift as we have been looking at attendance in the past. As I referenced before, those other adjustments weren't a natural transition year. I think one of the questions I think I received earlier was, how will the principals create this environment and this culture to welcome students from Piermont? This is something the principals at our middle schools do every single year. They have 6th graders coming to them from 3 different schools already. And so part of their ongoing middle school model is to transition kiddos from 5th grade to 6th grade. So this is really a natural point to do this when we have kids from multiple elementary schools joining together to start creating new memories as they enter middle school. Now, would this be most beneficial to begin reducing the student population at West Middle next school year? Absolutely it would be. And there are ways we could go about doing that, but it would not be ideal for students. And we are sensitive to that. In addition, it wouldn't be aligned with our board guidelines that Paul shared. So we are truly staying true to the work and the parameters that we have. Next slide, please. At this point, I'm gathering you may be asking some what if scenarios, what if questions, because they're all, this all can be emotional and feel personal. And please, no, it's not. It's about doing what is best for our kids. And so let me try to answer a couple of questions you may have if this proposed solution were to go into effect. If a family currently has a child in 5th grade, and let's say in 3rd grade or 4th grade as well, will the children have to attend 2 different middle schools? Absolutely not. That would be awful. Remember, we have board guidelines, and it's always, our intention to do what is best as we align our decisions and recommendations with those board guidelines. So if you have a fifth grader who will head to middle school next year, remember this plan doesn't impact them at all. They will go to school that they're planning to attend, and transportation will be provided for each year of middle school, okay? So as you look at this chart, when your current fourth grader heads to middle school, you could request a special assignment and it will be approved. And then both of your middle schoolers will be attending the same school. Transportation will be provided during this child's 6th and 7th grade year if they are a current fourth grader. I think we need to go ahead and click again, Jason. So let's say if you have a fifth grader and a third grader. So now we're at the bottom of the chart. Transportation for your third grader will only be provided during the 6th grade year. So if you click again, Jason, you see that that third grader will have that transportation provided. As you see there, the student that is in 8th grade has transportation provided for those 3 years because they are not attending the school under special assignment. The other kiddos would be attending school under special assignment if this happened to be the circumstance and a special assignment was requested. So again, we want families who have students attending the same level to be in the same school. And this is consistent with what has occurred during previous attendance corrections. Okay, next slide. So there've been some questions around special assignment. And special assignments in this particular situation, if this recommendation is approved by the board, will only be assigned if a younger sibling will be attending the middle school at the same time as the older sibling. Okay, so that chart before, you could see that we had siblings attending the middle school at the same time, which is why we could approve special assignment to keep families together. Transportation will not be provided for students attending via special assignment. Now, if they have that older sibling at the school, and we were providing transportation for that older sibling based on the natural feeder pattern that was in, that was in place at the time, siblings can ride that bus as long as that older sibling is there. But again, once that older sibling leaves, if any kids are on special assignment, transportation will not be provided. Okay, next slide. One of the questions that we received is, if I have a 6th and 8th grader next school year, does it impact me? No, absolutely not. If you will have a 6th and 8th grader or a 7th grader next school year, this does not impact them at all. Another question, can my current fifth grader attend the middle school in the proposed solution next school year? Remember, it doesn't impact current fifth graders, but let's say a family wants their current fifth grader to attend a different middle school based on the proposed solution. Yes, this can occur. Families will have to request a special assignment and transportation will not be provided during the 2021-2022 school year. Remember, we don't provide transportation when a student is approved for special assignment. Some families, why might somebody want to do this? Some families might be thinking ahead and want to do this because maybe they have a current third grader or a current fourth grader. And this way, both kids would be in that appropriate feeder school and transportation would be provided once this transition begins. So for that third grader or that fourth grader when they get to middle school. Okay. All right, next slide, please. Special programs at West Middle. So you might be asking about the special programs, and we've had several questions following the board meeting as well regarding special programs. So currently, the Mosaics program is at West Middle, and right now, approximately 40 students attend West Middle based on being in the Mosaics program. We also have the Deaf Hard of Hearing program, one of the middle schools in St. Louis County, and we have 15 students attending this school year. So we've been asked, again, what about those special programs at West Middle? What if those special programs were moved? Well, if we move those programs, it's not going to solve the issue. As we have looked at this closely, and I just told you the few students who are in those programs. So again, due to the size of those programs, it would not accomplish the objective that we have in order to reduce the student enrollment at West Middle School. Since our board meeting, we have heard from some parents of students in Mosaics and some staff members who teach students participating in Mosaics at West Middle. And they have some concerns with Mosaics staying at West Middle. So it has been suggested that if, the board moves forward with this recommendation and students from Piermont transition to South Middle, that we consider moving the Mosaics program to South Middle. And a number of folks have given their reason and rationale for that. And a lot of it does make sense as we think about friendships and community. So that is something also that we have noted as we continue listening, engaging, and ultimately develop a recommendation for the Board of Education. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Tandy at this time.
Thank you, Chelsea. And we appreciate all of your feedback so far on the Google Doc. And as we'll say later, we'll encourage you to keep sending us your feedback and questions and suggestions and ideas. We'd like to summarize a few of the major themes that we've received so far and discuss them tonight. And then we will discuss in more detail more of the questions and topics in the second webinar. I will say as an aside, just generally speaking, the feedback that we've received from the HANA community has been that it makes a lot of sense to transition to Southwest since they're right next door. Okay, next slide, please. So some of the themes, the major themes so far that we've received. Number one, suggestion of moving the special, instead of changing the boundary lines, just shift some of the special programs out of West Middle to South Middle or wherever. And as Dr. Watson mentioned, there's several reasons why that alone would not really solve the enrollment problem. That would not be enough students or enough space to solve the issues that Dr. Miller mentioned. However, based on the feedback, if we did do this with the Piermont, we would want to look at Mosaics as a potential, also including them in the shift to keep those students together. Another suggestion was simply to add on or add pods or trailers, or sometimes we call them learning cottages to make it sound better. And we occasionally do that in Parkway. We try to avoid that. But as we mentioned earlier, at this time, we do not believe adding on to West Middle is a good solution. Number one, it really doesn't fix a lot of the problems that Dr. Miller is experiencing. Number one. Number two, it adds to some safety and traffic concerns that are already there that we want to be careful of. And number three, it's a long-term solution. It takes multiple years and a lot of financial resources. And we want, if we have another viable solution that would save taxpayer money, we want to pursue that one if we can. The other suggestions are, number one, transition South Middle into a 6th grade center, and we're going to talk about that. Another would be to end or make changes to the current Highcroft Ridge and Mason Ridge feeder pattern splits that Patty mentioned to Central and West. And then the final theme was just sort of this question about, well, what's going to be the decision with the high schools, or with the high school feeder if this decision is made, because the Hannahwood students already would matriculate through to South High, so that would change there. The bigger question is Piermont. So I think what I'd like to start with is to talk about, before we do, I want to clarify, when we say 6th grade center, what's been recommended, what we're talking about there, again, just to state the obvious, would be all of the students at at the west and south areas, so it'd be West Middle, South Middle, and Southwest Middle, all of their sixth graders would go to South Middle. And then what that would require then, obviously, for South Middle is those seventh and eighth graders at South Middle would have to basically immediately shift to Southwest Middle in order to accomplish that. So that would be was the suggestion. And I know that then Dr. Watson, I think, is going to address this issue.
Thank you, Mr. Tandy. So sixth grade center and South Middle concept. Years ago, Parkway did study this concept. As Paul mentioned, it creates an additional transition for students. You know, think about a seventh grader who is getting ready to start their second year at South Middle potentially, would then be moving to Southwest Middle School for 2 years, or a kiddo who's getting ready to start their eighth grade year at South Middle would then be moving to Southwest Middle for 1 year, and then another transition to the high school the following year. So it wouldn't also, you know, it would not provide that consistency with students in the other areas of our school district. And the other thing that we have to think about is the friendships there and what that community looks like as we are making that shift and having kids shift multiple times, sometimes too quickly, as you think about those seventh and eighth graders. And then potentially this would overcrowd South Middle School, currently our smallest middle school, and underutilize West Middle and Southwest Middle School. And so as we briefly looked at the numbers there and looked at our board guidelines, this concept would not be in alignment with the board guidelines. And again, we already mentioned it would require kiddos to switch during those middle school years, which we know are sometimes years that kids have some anxiety about many different aspects of being an early adolescent. And we have found that sometimes transitions just aren't the best, even though we do everything possible to ease the transition for our kiddos. So those are the thoughts from previous conversations around the sixth grade center concept, and some current thoughts.
Yeah, thank you for that, Dr. Watson. And yes, I know we have looked at that in the past, and for those reasons, haven't pursued a sixth grade center concept. The other suggestion, one of the other suggestions that has sort of been a theme is, well, we should maybe look at transitioning students from that are Highcroft Ridge and Mason Ridge and shift some of those students to Central. And as a reminder, again, Patty mentioned this, but Highcroft Ridge has 80% roughly of their student population that already go to Central, and then about 20% go to West, and then Mason Ridge is the opposite, about 80% go to West, 20% to Central. So we had Dr. Tyson run some numbers, and Patty is going to walk you through what the impact would be if we did look at that sort of a change.
Thank you, Paul. So as Paul mentioned, we had Dr. Nathan Tyson run the numbers. So what you see in the first part of this grid is our current enrollment at Central Middle and West Middle. So in this option, we are looking at shifting all the students at Highcroft Elementary and have them go all to Central Middle. So currently 20% of those students go to West Middle. So when we put that into our projections, you can see that it has very minimal impact for the West Middle enrollment. So over a 5-year period, it only decreases the enrollment at West Middle by a projected 65 students. Central Middle, it essentially keeps the same 913 students, and these 913 students are students of today, so they do vary slightly from the 5-year projections that you saw in the previous slides as well. but the 901 is a slight increase from the 866. So it doesn't provide the impact that we need in order to lessen the overall enrollment from West Middle. Next slide. When we look at the potential shift of all Mason Ridge students to Central Middle from West Middle, we have a slightly different story. So recall that the Mason Ridge students are currently split 20% into Central Middle and 80% into West Middle. So for this option, it would have all the students gradually going into Central Middle. As you look at the numbers, what we essentially do would be to relieve the enrollment from West Middle. However, it would then cause inadvertently to overcrowd potentially Central Middle. So that enrollment would move from 913 students to over 1,000 to 1,042. So this is not a viable option that will work for the size of Central Middle School.
Thank you, Patty. So to summarize, in order to make that work, you would have to shift a lot of kids northward to the central area, which is already basically full. And now we just be shifting the problem to another attendance area, or, to the central area.
Correct. And remember too, that Northeast Middle had a slight enrollment gain in the upcoming 5 years as well.
Thank you, Patty, for that. And then the other theme was the big question about the high school feeder pattern. We don't have a recommendation, but I'll turn it over to Chelsea to talk a little bit about kind of how we see this moving forward.
Thank you. So earlier, as you saw, our middle school enrollment is steady, and it's projected for the most part to be steady. Both of our high schools can hold student enrollment if Piermont students attend West High or South High. But please know that we are going to continue to listen to your feedback. Remember, this is a middle school enrollment problem. That's why we don't have a recommendation in regards to a high school at this time. We will continue to do some more analysis based on the board guidelines. And so we will bring this back to the next webinar with some information there as we look at the board guidelines and think about high schools. Ultimately, the administration, we have to make a recommendation to the board, and the board will have to make a decision as to what high school our students will attend if this recommendation or a recommendation similar to what has currently, been proposed occurs. So as you can imagine, we can't provide, if this recommendation is approved, we can't provide transportation to both schools. We really have to think carefully about our bus routes and all that goes into transporting our kids to school. So again, this isn't a high school attendance issue or enrollment issue. It's about our middle school. And based on those 5-year projections, they're steady. And it looks as though, based on high school, if one high school is chosen as that feeder, that the other high school could handle some additional enrollment as well. And so it looks as though, we could provide special assignments if those are requested based on this particular situation and the moves that would occur. So that certainly is an option that has been an option. It was an option in 2011 when we could facilitate such based on numbers. I will tell you, a couple of years ago with the elementary school, we could not grant special assignments because our schools were full, and we had to make the shift because the schools were full and projected to get larger. But again, with the high school piece, some other conversations certainly can occur regarding high school.
Oh, thank you, Patty or Chelsea. So, and stating the obvious, we have to choose one high school because we have to provide transportation to one of the high schools. We can't provide, although we'd love to, but from a fiscal standpoint, we can't provide transportation to multiple high schools. So we have to, the board would ultimately have to choose, one recommendation. And then as Dr. Watson mentioned, you could still do special assignment. And under the current, 5-year projections, the capacity is still there. No guarantees long term, but that would be the route if you wanted to attend the other high school. So we mentioned this planning timeline at the board meeting the other night. We made a presentation on the 14th, and then here we are on the first Zoom webinar. We will have another on the 27th, and would encourage you to continue to submit questions. The majority of that time next week will be devoted to responding to specific questions and issues that have been raised. So we'll get a little bit into the weeds on some of that next week. We will also present to you some information about the high school feeder patterns and how they align or do not align to the guidelines. So we'll have some information to share on that. The way ahead, we'll have to work with the school board to determine what May through the fall basically looks like. We are not planning to bring anything to the board to ask for their decision until sometime in the fall. But we do need some additional time for community conversations so we can get more feedback. What that exactly looks like, we will let you know. But that will occur, May through. We'll try to get out of the school year and then do some engagement as we get closer to the school kicking back up, and then sometime in the fall, then we would bring a recommendation to the board. If the board decides to make the change, then we would begin informing families in the fall. And this fall would be our suggestion. And then in the fall of 22 would be when the transition would begin if the decision was made to proceed. Next slide, please. So again, the next webinar is next Tuesday, 5:30 to 7. Tomorrow, everyone will receive an email with, it will also have a link to this video. So those people who signed up and were not able to attend and watch it tonight, you'll get a video. You can watch it at your convenience. We'll also remind you of the link where you can submit your feedback to us. And we would encourage everyone to submit their comments. I mean, I know tonight we have people from a number of schools. I know we also have some folks from Highcroft and Mason Ridge and probably the high schools. So if you have thoughts or feedback, we may have other families from Henry, I don't know, but we would really like to know, because this does influence everyone in the West and South Attendance area to some degree. And so we would love to hear your feedback, and would appreciate if you take a few moments to share that with us on that link. And then we will dive into that at this time next week. So Chelsea, I'll put it back to you. It looks like we plan to go till 7. We're just a little bit early. That folks will appreciate having a little extra time for at home.
Thank you, Paul. The gift of time is something we all appreciate. So again, Mrs. Bedborough, thank you so much for your information and contributions this evening. Mr. Tandy, Dr. Miller, and you've heard us mention Jason Rooks. He is the masterful technology guru who keeps everything running and keeps us from floundering if we were to click on these slides. So Jason, thank you so very much for your assistance this evening. All right, everybody. Well, there's still some sunshine outside. Enjoy your evening, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts and comments by clicking on that link and sharing any aspect of this proposal and process that you'd like to share. Have a good evening, everyone.